Hello YouTube, and welcome to another one of my vacuum cleaners. And just like the last video, I'm doing another oldie today. This one is another old Hoover, and many of you, I'm sure, will recognise this as the Hoover Ranger. Yes, the Hoover Senior Ranger. Basically, this machine was a continuation of the old Hoover Senior model, which ran for years and years. It was the direct replacement for the, I believe it was the 6525, formerly known as the 652A, which first came about in 1958 as the 652, and it was basically exactly the same platform, just with a plastic hood fitted on the top. This machine, the Ranger, I believe, came about in around about 1974. So what's significant about this to me is that this was the machine that my parents had for years and years, throughout the 70s when I was a small child. Okay? So it's one of my earliest vacuum cleaner memories is of this actual model, because the one they had was identical to this, with the gold bag on the back, and later on they changed the machine slightly to have a brown bag. I believe that was the U4014, but this is the U4002 or the U4002. It was the first model of Ranger hood, and this model dates from August 1975. So it's just around 39 years old now, this machine. It'll be 40 years old next year. And yes, it does hold a fair few memories for me, just standing here looking at this now. And I bought this from eBay about two and a half years ago. What did I have to pay for this one? It wasn't very much, like £20–25 I think. And they do sometimes crop up on eBay from time to time. Not very often now, as I say, because these went out of production in the early 80s. It became the PowerPlus, I believe, which was a slightly more modern version in the very early 80s, which led up until about 1983, when basically the Ranger PowerPlus, and I believe it was the Hoover Junior hardbag, the old replacement for the Starlight, all those were discontinued and replaced by the Hoover Turbopower 1 in 1983. So basically, this is really the last of the incarnations of the old type with the soft bag on the back. They did bring one out as the Turbopower Junior, but it was a lot more modern looking than this. This really, it was the last of the really old vintage Hoover styles, the Ranger, then the PowerPlus. So, okay, we get down and have another look at it now in a bit more detail from around to the side there. It's very difficult to talk for half an hour about an old cleaner like this, so I have to think about what I'm going to say some of the times. But basically, this was not a lot different from the old 652. It had pretty much the same type of handle and the handle bail down here. Pretty much the same bag setup on the back with the spring lever on the back here. Cable runs down the handle exactly the same. Like I say, the only real difference between this and the 652 that it replaced was that it had a plastic hood that covered entire chassis on this machine, whereas the 652 had the metal chassis visible with just a little plastic hood over the top. So this was, as far as this part was concerned, a fair change on what the 652 and the 6525 was. It also had the on and off button in a different place here, being on the top, because before it used to be down here. a little round button on the side, much as on the Junior. I will do a look at one of the 652As I have in due course. The models I've got upstairs aren't that brilliant. I was looking for a better model to come along, but you know, the ones I've got upstairs aren't all totally original. This one is. It has the original bag, it has the original cable. The only thing that isn't is the plug, which I had to change because the plug was knackered when I had it. But otherwise, you know, for a Ranger, it's actually in very good condition. This is. Very little scratching on the handle. We usually found with these is that people would scratch the handles all down here or scratch the paint off them, and they'd look tatty. But aside from a very small crack in the lens here and a little tiny few scratches on the side, this really, it's a very good example of an old Ranger, the U4002. The later models, as I said, they had a darker brown bag on the back here, and much the same as what they did with the Junior, which was actually the U4012, which is the replacement for the 1346A. They did exactly the same thing by having a top fill bag on the Ranger as well as they did on the Junior. But on the early models, it was just like on the 1346A, it had a bottom fill. And if I just unzip the bag here, what we can see is it's exactly the same thing. You have your bellows at the bottom, like that, then you have your fill tube, and you had your rubber slider, and you used to put your bag on and roll the slide up here to secure the bag on. Very simple way of doing it. This was actually slightly different though, in the fact that you could remove the whole thing and take it to the bin as it is, by simply take the bag down, like that, and then it had a spring-loaded clamp here, which you could pull to one side and completely remove the bag assembly, like that. And that would then just reveal the cleaner, like so. And you could see the port here, where the dirt came out from the back of the fan housing, and the little spring-loaded clip that would hold the bag bellows flange on, like so. And there was the paper gasket around here that would stop the dirt leaking out. So, you know, if you didn't want to get dust all over your carpet, all you do is take it off like this, take it to the bin, and then do it outside. You know, so I think that was a more convenient way of emptying the bag with this. And then it was very easy to put back on. You just slot your two lugs here on the flange into these little slots here at the bottom. Push it up, and then latch it back into position like so, and then put it back on its hanger like that. That was a very easy way of changing the bag there, which I think was a very, very good idea. On the side, much as on the Juniors of the time, you had a 4-position height adjuster. So right at the very top here was for the shortest pile carpets, and then right down at the bottom would lower it right down and take it considerably off the floor here for very, very, very long shag pile. Okay, and it operated in a slightly different way, the adjustment, than the Junior, in that on this machine the height adjustment operated on the rear wheels. As you can see, as I'm moving that now, you could see the rear wheels going in or out. Whereas on the Junior it used to operate on the front wheels to raise or lower the height. On this one it was always on the back. And it was exactly the same on the 652 before it. It used to use the back wheel adjustment as well. So if we have a look at the underneath of the machine now, bring it up to the camera. This is a very heavy machine in terms of today's standards. When you look at the bottom of this, you can see the quality of that was quite phenomenal, really. It was an all metal chassis on this machine, which is what made it heavy. You could pick this up and just look at that and look at the quality of how well built that machine really is. Absolutely fantastic. So what we have under here is, this is the port here where you'd slot your tool converter in. Unfortunately I haven't got the toolkit for one of these, or the seniors at the moment. When one comes along I will grab one if I see one there and it's a suitable price. But basically you'd have a pan converter that slid into the bottom of here, and if I just take this off, that is your belt cover, like so. What that would do, when you slid it in, it would cover over here, but the belt would actually stay on the machine. So you'd have a little gap in the front where the suction would leak. And what you also have is a little micro switch on there that when you push the converter in, it would speed the motor up. And it was done like that, I think, to take account of the small amount of suction that it was losing from this converter in here. Here you can see as well the fan there as I spin it round, and the pulley. The pulley was fully replaceable. When they wore out, you put a new pulley on. It used the round belt, sorry, and again the same type of brush roll as what we used to see on the Junior of the time, and that had replaceable brush strips and the beta bars. So this was another Hoover. So let's put this down. This was another Hoover. It used to beat as it sweeps, as it cleans. And again, when you push it across the carpet, you can hear that deep, deep growl as the action of the brush roll. So that sole plate used to just fit back on here. And do your two clamps up there. Yeah, very, very good quality, the underside of that machine. You don't see that anymore now. The only machines really that are built that solid nowadays with a metal chassis like that is the Kirby. That's about it. How times have changed since the 70s when this was made. We have a product label underneath. It says Hoover model U4002, 400/600 watts. So basically in carpet mode it used 400 watts, the motor, and when you shoved the tools in the back it would speed the motor up to 600 watts. So that really was nearly 255. It was nearly 3 times more powerful than the Hoover Junior of the time, this machine, when it was in tools mode. But from reports I've heard is that the actual suction through the tools wasn't actually as good as the Junior because of this pan converter layout. What we saw when they brought the Turbopower 1 out, which really, the Turbopower 1 was one of the replacement for this machine, and a couple of other models which had hard bags on at the time, but they used to use a proper sealed pan converter which would go over here and completely, it would seal it so you'd get no air leaks. So they were a fair bit better in terms of using the tools as to what the old models like this were. Now, this model's claim to fame, the Hoover Ranger, or the Senior Ranger, was that in the late 70s, the U4014, which was the second incarnation of this, was used for the world famous, well, I don't know about world famous, but it was famous in this country, the Shake and Vac advert, the very first one, when it first came out. And you had this lady with the flared trousers on, 1979 I think it was. I think that was when that advert came out. Shaking this stuff all over the carpet, and then she'd go around with the Hoover Ranger there to pick it all up, without really realising that all it was doing was completely clogging the bag up at the back, and the machine would lose all suction. Not very good stuff, shaken back for the carpets. Well, not good for your cleaner either. Okay, So this machine, it would have had originally a more clear colour headlamp lens than this, but for some reason these early models, the U4002, the plastic, the headlight went a very yellowy colour. It all faded out over time and became virtually the same colour as the actual rest of the hood. And you notice that when it's switched on, the headlight comes on, that it produces very yellow light through here, because I think the pigment or the dye actually came out of this hood and seemed to fade this out. It's hard to explain really why that happened, because the later ones, the U4014, they seem to have their headlight lens that would stay a lot whiter, a lot clearer, so it stood out a lot more. But there we go. On the side there you have the air ventilation slot there for the motor. This being a direct air or a dirty fan, the motor wouldn't be cooled by the airflow going through the motor. What it would have is a separate little motor fan on the back here that would cool the motor, and it would have the main fan underneath, and it was that main fan that used to pull all the dirt through. That's why these old cleaners were referred to as dirty fan, because the fan dealt with the dirt directly. Okay, so what we'd have on the back here as well was a little pedal release there. So you take the handle down there to number 1 position. Again, like many other cleaners, that was to enable it to be able to lift it up to go over thresholds, or to be lifted up to go onto a higher rug. And then, to be able to get it really low, you press that again, and it would drop right flat to the ground like so. So when you look at the profile of that, it was actually a very, very slimline machine when you looked at it like that. You'd be able to get it right under the lowest tables there, even under chairs. Very, very good the way that worked. So, what we'll do, because you know, it really is very difficult to be able to talk for so long on such an old cleaner like this. I haven't got any tools to demonstrate with it, so it's rather a pity, because I would have liked to have had a toolkit for this machine, like I have with the Turbopower one, and I've got one with the Junior as well. And yeah, so this machine basically would have been what people used all throughout the 70s. Would have been another popular machine. I don't know whether they were as popular as the Junior at the time, because obviously they were more expensive. But come the 80s, it all started changing, and all these metal platform machines died. Unfortunately, they all became plastic with the Turbopower one, and the 80s throwaway age began. That was the time when people stopped bothering having machines repaired, and they just threw them away and buy a new one. But with this, when you had one of these, if it was something wrong with it, you'd have it repaired. I don't know what the length of this cable is. I think it's only about 5.5, 6 metres. 6 metres, I think, this one. So again, it didn't have a very long cable. But I think back in those days, people didn't have such big rooms as they have now. You know, in an old house like this, before it was converted, it had 2 small rooms, one in the back here and one in the front. And this length of cable would have been ideal for that, just to use in single, small rooms. Okay. So, let's see how she runs then, shall we? What a pleasure to use. What a fantastic old cleaner. I remember when I was a young lad, I used to use my mother's cleaner, and it's just like brings back so many memories to push this around and to have that smell. You know, it gives gives off that old vacuum cleaner smell when the motor starts to get warm, and you can smell the oil and that coming off, because I oiled all the bearings and everything, and to see the way the pile has been completely lifted by that brush roll, absolutely beautiful. For a machine that's now just knocking on 40 years old, that does a brilliant job on carpets, that does. Now, I did in the early videos used to throw a load of dirt down on the carpet, but unfortunately I don't do that now because it did make too much of a mess and stain the carpet, so I'll leave Roger to do that for you. Throw his bag of dirt down. But basically, you know, this was seen as the top of the range Hoover at the time in those days. If you could afford better than a Junior, you'd have one of these instead. You know, I think the more affluent you were, you'd have a Hoover Senior rather than the Junior. And if you had a really big house as well, you'd probably have one of these type, because the Junior was, although it was really cute, it was only a very, very small cleaner, and it could take you hours to go and do your vacuuming and that with your big house. This was, you could get around your cleaning a lot quicker with this. Wow, that really has pulled the pile up here beautifully. And it's conclusive proof there that you don't need to have 2,100 watts to clean your carpets, because this machine would do it with 400 watts. And that was one of the beauties of a direct air system or a dirty fan. They didn't use that much electricity because the air path on these was so simple. It would take it straight up from here, under the cleaner, into the fan, out of the fan and into the bag, and that was it. There was none of these complicated air channels and filters and everything that you have on modern cleaners now. This really was basic. Really basic. It was a single layer filtration. It was the single layer of the bag, and that was it. Absolutely fantastic. Now, for those observant that noticed when I had this off, it hasn't actually got a Hoover bag inside. This is actually a SIBO bag at the moment in here, because when I had this I didn't have any H1 bags, and I thought, well, if I chop the top off a SIBO X series bag, chop the plastic top off, I'll be able to use that on here. So it's actually now got a SIBO bag in, so it improves the filtration on it, so it's got 3-layer filtration. But that'll work just as well, I think, in the old days with the single layer paper bag. So there we go, the Hoover Senior Ranger. Very big in the 1970s, and really it was the last of the very old type vintage style Hoover uprights, because after this we went on to the Turbopower range. So with this little look here, I shall say goodbye, and I'll see you on the next video.